Hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Better the Pond Pondcast, where we talk to amazing people doing incredible things that lead the charge of generosity. My name is Warren Berry, and I'm your host and the founder of Instinctive Solutions, where we believe that everyone is an odd duck, but that's what makes them awesome. Today, our guest is Nicole Sinclair. I can help with that. Let me hold the ladder. Community, belonging, contribution. These three words capture the essence of today's guest. Growing up in the woods of Sorrento, British Columbia, Nicole's happy place was the park where everyone would come to gather and create community. Christmas was right straight out of Who-Ville. Working in a homeless shelter, working in business, marketing, serving, retail, this girl has done it all. But she has found her true talent and her passion with the Insurance Brokers Association of Saskatchewan. Being a part of the Brokers Care campaign is one way that Nicole has created ripples and is doing her part to better the pond. Ladies and gentlemen, Nicole Sinclair. Nicole Sinclair.
Warren.
I want to thank you ever so much for taking the time out of your life to be a guest on my Better the Pond podcast. I'm honored to have you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I have plenty of time on my hands these days. So it's great. I'm happy to be here.
That's good. We met actually just recently, and we'll talk about IBAS, what that all means, but it was through the Leaders Forum. I was a speaker for that educational platform that you guys have so wonderfully created. And we have not met in person. We've only met on Zoom a couple of times, but I feel like I've known you forever. Like we could sit and talk for days.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking lots for sure. I feel the same way, which is really great and rare that you meet people via Zoom and could be like, yeah, we're friends and we could go for drinks tomorrow when we're allowed to, and everything would be fine. And I think that's great.
Yeah, me too. So let's jump right into this. So Nicole, I want to know what got you from being a gosling, so your humble beginnings, to leaving the nest to where you are today. Nicole Sinclair, what is your backstory?
So I am from a very rural town in the interior of British Columbia, and small enough that we didn't have a high school. So I spent a lot of time on buses in my youth.
And so what is the name of said rural town in which you were hatched?
Sorrento, British Columbia.
So say that again?
Sorrento?
Sorrento?
Sorrento. It's named after a town in Italy. So if you say it like you're Italian, you'll get it right. It's in the Shuswap area, near Salmon Arm.
Okay. I've never heard of it.
You should check it out.
I will. Okay. So how small was this town?
I think probably like town and surrounding area, 4,000 people.
Oh,
and that's like very surrounding area. So yeah.
But a absolutely beautiful environment to grow up in.
Wonderful, wonderful place to grow up. Very strong sense of community, which is something I took for granted when you are a teenager in a small town. Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. I will retire there one day.
So to my listeners, so I have listeners from around the world. So can you paint us a picture, right, of what that would look like? When you got up in the morning and you went outside, what did you see?
So we lived up an old logging road in the forest. So I would just see trees and ferns, which have become one of my favorite plants. And I absolutely loved it. So you couldn't see any other houses from our houses. From our house, we lived on a kilometer, I would say, connected to major roads. It was about 1.5 kilometers long. So, as a kid, wake up, if you walk outside, you're typically going to the bus. We had dogs all the time that walked us to the bus. There was a lot of wildlife in the area. And I had 2 siblings and they were just always around as well.
Yeah, 2 other siblings?
I have 2 brothers.
2 brothers, 2 older, younger?
One of each.
You are in the middle.
Yes, which makes sense, right?
It does make sense, and we're going to get into that. Okay. And so was the mountains all around once you got out of the ferns? Could you see mountains around you? Or was it fairly flat in that area?
Oh, it's very, very mountainous. It was not flat. Um, yeah, and just certain things that I think, especially now that I live in a city, that I didn't think were strange, but would definitely be strange to other people. For example, like street lights and the idea that you could do things at night and still see what you're doing. And just like ease of access for certain things. We had a wood stove or like a pellet burning stove. We didn't live on a like what here you would call an RM taking care of property. So we shoveled and sanded and hauled water and chopped wood and all those things that I think, make people tough. Climbed into holes, primed wells.
You had to do it all. So what did your dad do that you grew up there and you lived sort of, up in the woods?
Well, and that's an interesting story because my dad's job is also what brought me to Saskatchewan. So he was a journeyman electrician. So when we were younger, we would just go wherever he was working, which is great because we lived in a lot of different places. And I think my mom just got really good at selling everything we owned, and we would pack up and we would move. So, for example, I was actually born in Kamloops, British Columbia. My father's job was in Ontario. So he went ahead, my mom stayed back, waited till she had me, sold her house, and then drove me and my older sibling, who would have been 1.5, to Ontario. And then we lived there.
Wow.
Yeah, so I didn't actually meet my dad till I was 6 weeks old. And so we did that for a long time, and it was fantastic because he worked in some really cool places, like at the Kokanee Brewery in the Kootenays. So we would spend summers in the Kootenays. And then I think when we got to like the Salmon Arm Sorrento area, they realized that we couldn't, all caravan or van around together forever. We had to go to school. And they recognized that it was a wonderful place for children to grow up, which was really fortunate for us. And the unfortunate part is that my dad was still a journeyman electrician, so he was gone a lot.
Mm. It's interesting how, I've talked to certain people that go back to their childhood and they're like, oh, I was, we had to move and we never had a place to land. And, it's sort of the kind of the picture of how awful it was. And you're
Oh,
saying, this is fantastic. I got to see this and I got to see that and I got to experience these things. And it was for you, it was a wonderful experience. And for other people, it's like, it was awful because I never knew where home was.
oh, I think like home is the people that you have in it. We have a big extended family, and our family was always close. And our family has a lot of fun together. So it never felt like we didn't have a place to land. We were, and I was really little. So like I didn't know any better, right? So
Hmm.
we lived on a farm on the coast for a little while, and I was young enough that I was like, well, there's all these animals here, and I just assumed that they were ours because we lived in the farmhouse and there was all these animals. But then I got confused when we moved away, and I was like, well, what happened to all those chickens? Yeah.
And you didn't try to bring them with?
Not that I recall. Like, I'm sure I was like, well, I named one Bernice after the pigeon from Sesame Street, but one day Bernice bit me, and then our relationship was over.
So so you said that you spent a lot of time on the bus because obviously when you didn't have a high school. So where did you go to high school?
In Salmon Arm.
Oh, in Salmon Arm.
So
Um,
it's about 40 minutes, like on a bus, it's about 40 minutes each way.
oh wow.
Mhm.
So growing up, and you were sort of, obviously, 40 minutes away, but I mean, and you were sort of, you seem to be, what I'm hearing from you say is you're fairly isolated, right? Living, up in the woods. So you didn't, get to hang out with your friends or do sports, or did you get a chance to do any of those other things that, not, the normal city life living?
Yeah, no, we had normal rural life living. My mother was very busy. So with my dad working away, she managed her three not calm children very, very well. So we still spent a lot of time with friends. Our house was like the friend hub house
Mm.
where, like someone comes at the beginning of spring break and their parents pick them up at the end of spring break. And I also think there's things that you get used to, that your friends are like a 30-minute bike ride away, or, a path through the bush that gets you there faster. But my mom drove us around a lot when we were kids. So fortunately enough, when you're quite small, there's tons of things for you to do in the community. We had really good sports leagues there. But yeah, once we get old now, when I think about how much she used to drive us around, I'm like, I would have just said no.
But isn't it interesting that to look back and see, right? Like how much effort like your mom would have put in, or how much time she dedicated, right, to make sure that you guys had what you needed.
Hmm. And it's interesting just what seems normal at the time. So I think last summer I was back there and my youngest sibling still lives in the area, and we had driven what would have normally been the route that we took on the bus every day. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, how often do you do this? And he's like, you've changed. Because it just used to seem like it was, how you got to things. And I never thought of it as like this burden. But now I'm so spoiled. Everything in Regina is so easy to access, and it is a capital city. So we have access to a lot for our population size. And you get comfortable with those things, then everything else seems weird. Where, when it's the other way around, the idea that people want to live in a spot with 250,000 other people is just like,
So so you went to high school in Salmon. Tell me about your high school years. I mean, you weren't a troublemaker, were you?
no, not really. I was pretty good. We played sports, so um, that usually helps. We also yeah, I just don't remember having a lot of time to get into trouble, but also location makes it tricky. Like we did some typical teenage things, but when I hear friends from different places talk about like sneaking out at night, like pff, there was absolutely no way where we lived that I could climb out my bedroom window, um, and just you would be standing in a pitch black forest. And I lived there for, oh my gosh, 15-ish years. There is absolutely no way that I'd be able to walk from my house to like a road where someone could pick me up on and make it and find my way. So there's those certain experiences that I think when you're a teen, you think you're missing out on all of these things. But then once you become an adult, you're like, well, thank goodness.
Yeah. I was gonna say it probably was a blessing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what sports did you play in high school?
Um, when all my childhood into my teens, I played softball and hardball. I only played hardball because I personally think softball is a much better sport. There was one year where we just didn't have enough young girls to put together a softball team. So I played for the boys' hardball team, and of course got hurt. So I didn't do that again. So I played softball until I think I was 17. I played soccer in like the end of elementary school and all through middle school. And I played basketball from elementary school through to like grade 11. And I boxed for a short period, and we were always in martial arts.
You boxed.
I did.
Feisty.
Yes. I had two brothers. I'm good at it.
Now the question was, did they box too?
Yes. And that's why I went, because they went. And
Oh,
so I just went too.
I thought you might have had the upper hand.
No, I did it because one of my siblings is almost 6 years younger than me. So I had the upper hand for a while. But then he turned like 17 and I didn't anymore. Our dad in his heyday was like a championship kickboxer. So lots of people in our family box.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And where are your parents now?
Well, they were here. And so I came here. But now they live in northern British Columbia in a town called Kitimat.
They went back to the roots.
Back to the mountains. Yes.
So did you in high school, did you work?
Kind of. You couldn't really. There wasn't a lot of places to work. And so, like, in order to get to school and get back, it took a lot of time. So you couldn't work, like, say, during the week. But I did work weekends and then on and off at this store that my mom managed a bakery in, and all my friends have also worked at. that was kind of like an everything store, I would say. Like they had a bakery and a liquor store, and it was a grocery store, and they had a tanning salon and a video store, which ages me a little bit.
But super cool.
Yeah.
Well, now was it VH? I don't want to offend
It
you.
was VHS
Okay.
and DVDs. But yeah, a mixture of both.
So back in the VHS days. So and when you worked there, did you do a little bit of everything, or did you have a certain role?
No, everyone did a little bit of everything. So I did the tanning salon and the video store. I just rewound movies all day. But I was also a cashier, and then I eventually ended up working in the bakery and deli. And yeah, except for like one or two departments, everyone kind of just had to get to know everything, which speaks volumes to the careers I chose later in life. There was also one restaurant, and I worked there in my older teen years as a server.
Um, I just feel the need to ask you this question. Looking back when you were a kid, growing up, where you did in the mountains and the trees and everything, do you have a favorite moment that really stands out?
One, I have like a happy place where I'd say a lot of moments happened at the happy place. So for such a small town, um, Sorrento has a beautiful park, and it's massive, and it has soccer fields and baseball diamonds and a tennis court and a skating rink in the winter time. And it is very much in my mind like the gathering hub of everything. And I remember when I was a kid, and it has like multiple jungle gyms and a path through the forest, and it was just absolutely gorgeous, a concession. So when I think back to like most of times where I was like really happy and having a good time and felt that like strong sense of community, was at the park. Because like over the weekend, there'd be what in my mind now is like 400 or 500 people, which I'm sure is probably not true. But to me, that's what it felt like.
Mhm. Um, and so what about it? Was it just because it was a gathering place? Was it because a place that people came together? Is that
Yeah.
really what?
Yeah. And I just thought it was really cool because you can't get that, like to gather a bunch of people when you have such a small population that's so spread out. It just didn't happen a lot. And then no one's ever unhappy at a park. There was this one slide that kids used to fall off and break their arm every summer. So they'd be unhappy then. But other than that, there's kids playing baseball and soccer and adults playing baseball and playing tennis. Like it's just a happy place. And I think for me, I still go back there and I take people there and I show it to them. A real sense of pride. And then like once a year, we do like a community cleanup. So you get assigned a portion of the town, and you would like walk around and pick up garbage and see if anything needed to be like touched up with paint. And really good initiative. We also used to do a thing called Light Up Sorrento, which all of the businesses are kind of like in this on both sides of the Trans-Canada Highway, and you can see them all from one spot, which in the summer is an absolute nightmare, but all the rest of the year it's perfectly fine. And they would just get a tree, people would sing, Santa would come, they would turn on all the lights at once. We would all sing Christmas carols, and it was fantastic.
That's a wonderful childhood memory right there.
Absolutely.
That's like Who-Ville.
It is like, but yeah, if I had to draw a picture of it, that is what it would be like.
So tell me about leaving the nest. So how old were you when you left the nest and started your journey into your own path?
I was 18. I think, yeah, I think people in Saskatchewan stay at home for a really long time, which we can talk about later. But I left when I was 18. I was in post-secondary. So given its rural location, the school I was going to had like satellite campuses. So I was on a satellite campus in Salmon Arm, but I could only do 2 of 4 years there. And if I wanted to finish a degree, I had to move to Kelowna, which I did.
And what were you taking?
Business administration.
Business administration. You were going to be a business person.
Yeah, I kind of specialized in marketing, but then, if you finish a degree program when you're 22 or 23, the idea that you're committing yourself to say marketing or management or finance for the rest of your life feels like a really bad idea to me. So um, I tell people I have a marketing degree because I could, and that's kind of all the classes I took in school, but it is a general business administration degree.
And you got to do it in Kelowna, British Columbia. If that is like one of the most beautiful places in the world.
It is. Kelowna is also the reason that I ended up in Saskatchewan because it is a beautiful place to be a tourist, and be for a little bit. It is a difficult place to build a career.
Tell me more.
Okay. So there's two schools in Kelowna, which when I started school, this was not the case, but there's Okanagan College, which had this very well respected business program. And still, when I hear people talk about their university business programs, I'm like, you should just go to Kelowna. Like, you're not getting what you need here. And then UBC Okanagan UBC opened a campus in Kelowna called UBC Okanagan. They were also specializing in business. So the effects of the recession were still very, very real in that area. And you have a town that seems like it's really big, but Kelowna is not very big. It's half the size of Regina. So you have two schools pumping out business grads and very few jobs. And a lot of the jobs are very seasonal, either ski hills or in the summer. Um, and I was never like fantastic. Like I didn't do all the extracurriculars, the activities. I didn't get straight A's. And it was just very clear to me that if I wanted to kind of build the career I was looking for, that it would make the most sense to leave. So I actually did live in Calgary for 6 months, and that was as long as I could hack that. Yeah, and then I ended up in Saskatchewan.
Okay, so let's just follow this thread here. So you went to, I mean, obviously you went to Calgary to work. I'm assuming that there was a job there. Am I correct in saying that?
No, I was winging it. One of my best friends was in university there, and she was like, just come here. So I just went there. And I got jobs while I was there, but I took a gap year between my first 2 years and then my second 2 years. And it was very eye opening because I was like, well, I did 2 years of business school. Like, I can get a job with one of these huge oil and gas companies. No, that is not the case. And I had always thought when I was younger, because I grew up in such a small town, I would want to live in this huge metropolis. And I did not. I did not like that at all. I thought everyone was kind of mean. Um, I did not understand public transit. There was a lot going on and I was not prepared for it. But I'm glad I went because at that point I was kind of on the fence about whether or not I was going to do the full degree program. And it became very clear to me very quickly that that was necessary.
So when you went to Calgary, what job did you just get? Did you get jobs in marketing? What did you do?
No, you can't get a job in marketing in Calgary with a diploma and no experience. I worked like a variety of different jobs. I worked for a cleaning company. I worked at a few different bars. I did some admin work. Yeah, I did a few different things thinking like, okay, well, this is temporary because I think serving is always a fallback, right? It's fantastic money. It's great for meeting people. It's tons of fun. So I would do that while I just like kept applying for these jobs I was never going to be qualified for. But also with this mindset that coming from a small town that like, no, I'll be really good at this. And if you would just let me tell you that, give me a chance, you'll see, which does not work in bigger places unless I was just doing it wrong, but it did not work for me.
It's interesting you say that because what comes to mind, right, is it's like I'm gonna hire to the resume, not to the person.
Yeah, look what they missed out on.
Yeah, exact. That's my point. That is my point. And we're going to get into that a little bit more, right, as to why I'm making that statement. So, so here you are, you're in Calgary, you're kind of floundering around, you're doing your thing, you're having fun, hopefully.
I was having a ton of fun.
Yes. And then what brought you to the prairies, to the Queen City, Regina, Saskatchewan?
I know it feels very random. So I had gone to Calgary, I was there for 6 months. I went back, finished my degree in Kelowna, and I had a marketing job for a co-op program in Kelowna with this fascinating company that was based in Kelowna, operated mostly in the UK and Australia, whose owners were from Scotland, but they liked Kelowna. So they're like, we'll run this business from Kelowna. So I learned a lot working there. And I also, through that job, the CEO of that company, it was a very small company, was the president of a board of directors at a low barrier homeless shelter. Um, and that executive director was actually in a nonprofit management course with me. So this web of small townness. And I ended up being a volunteer there. And I was like, okay, this is like the perfect mix between, the shelter I want to work at, which was a huge swing from me being like, I want to be really high up at like Shell Canada. And this small market, small, like very part-time marketing to bit position for an oil and gas training company. And then an unfortunate twist of events. There was a tuberculosis outbreak at the shelter, and some of the staff got tuberculosis, which was not ideal. But it ended up with me taking a paid position there from a volunteer. They needed some help. And just because of the hours I worked, it was an overnight shelter only. So I was never there overnight. So, and they, fixed all the things that needed to be fixed to make sure staff weren't getting TB. But these people still couldn't come into work. These are very vulnerable populations, and we can't be spreading tuberculosis around if we can avoid it. So yeah, I ended up in a paid position there for me for short term. I was a government funded position, which eventually went away, but it was really eye-opening for me to see like this world that I never knew existed in nonprofit organizations.
Was that in from the cold?
Yes. How do
Aha.
you
Hmm?
tell me more? How do you know?
I did my homework.
Okay.
So,
I think unfortunately In From the Cold doesn't exist anymore, but it was a brilliant organization ran by a fantastic woman, a group of the most dedicated volunteers and just, doing the Lord's work, as they say.
what did you learn out of that? I mean, that's, you're dealing with a very vulnerable population. It can be very frustrating. I'm sure just to because people go back into their habitual patterns and things like that. And you're doing all the work you can to try to help. What was your biggest sort of aha or learning that came out of that piece of your life?
Again, female leadership. I was of the opinion at the time, I was like, well, these people could just stop doing this and all these problems would be solved.
Mhm.
She was like, read this book, please. So I did, and it was called In the Realm of Hungry
Hungry
Ghosts.
Ghost by Gabor Mate, one of my favorite books.
And it was gut wrenching and horrible and so eye opening, especially because he was from Vancouver and we were not far away.
Mhm.
And that was a real mind shift for me. But also, like, I was not a caseworker. I wasn't, trying to get people into treatment. But what I was seeing was all the barriers that these people that would come in and be like, hey, I'm ready for this, like, not be like this anymore. And the people in paid positions trying to help them and just the walls they ran into that felt to me so stupid. And unnecessary and not like what was happening at the time that was not healthcare. The mentality was different then, but I don't know that that's gotten a lot better. But what I did see was people working together in a corporate structure that I had never worked with right before, like a nonprofit with a board of directors and executive director. And the impact that was making that really stuck with me.
Hmm. Interesting. You went into I'm trying to follow this. You go into I'm going to go into, well, you're a small town, right? And I'm sure you didn't, and when you were a child, you didn't have dreams of becoming a marketing guru for Shell.
Actually, so you and I have spoken before about competency tests and career planning and stuff. All signs pointed when I was in what I guess now would be middle school, but junior high school, um, to being a real estate agent or joining the military, which for like kind of in the back of my head, that was always my backup plan. Because again, when you start testing people's personality when they're 15 years old to get them to make life decisions that are pretty impactful, that was kind of where I thought I was headed. And I think I chose to go to post-secondary in the last week of high school. And I chose business because I was like, I have no idea. Because one way that I think high school fails kids sometimes is they don't tell them what kind of jobs there are. There's millions of different jobs in the world, but you don't know about them because you're 18 and the internet was not a huge part of our lives yet. So this girl that I knew, and she was really smart, she's like, I'm taking business, just come with me. And so I did, and it worked out really well.
Yeah, it's just interesting because you tell that story, right? And then there you are taking business school, you're into marketing, you're going to Calgary, and now I'm in a homeless shelter.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa. Right?
Let's edit that to make sure people know I worked at that shelter. I did not live there. But yeah, huge swing. And I'm not a big everything happens for a reason type of person, but that definitely set me on a trajectory that I pushed back on. Even though I was like, this place is magic. I really like these roles. This is the kind of work I want to do. There was still that thing that was like corporate ladder, corporate ladder, corporate ladder. So when I first moved to Regina, I did go back to working for a really big company and I lasted 3 months.
Tell me more. Why? What? 3 months. That's a
Not for
very
me.
short stint.
Yeah, it was a fantastic company, very successful, employs a lot of people, something that Saskatchewan should be really proud of, but it just was not. At the end of every day, I was like, I don't feel like any of this mattered at all. Um, and it does. What they do definitely matters, but it didn't matter to me.
Mhm.
And that was, I think, the big thing.
So did you make the decision? Did you choose to leave, or was it chosen for you?
A little bit of both. There was like a big round of layoffs, and I was like, you guys don't know, like, you know that I don't have any dependents, right? And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, I don't really need to work here. And I think it was pretty clear that it was not a good fit for me. Everyone that worked there was really nice, but I found it very suffocating.
And what about it was suffocating?
I think it was a very traditional, you've got 100 people working in cubicles and then a glass wall with other people behind it. Like a very structured management reporting system, working within proprietary software, like really rigid hours, those sorts of things. And then, yeah, that feeling of being like, I could have not done this today and the world would be about the same.
So it was the opposite of your park.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So where did you go from there? So now here you are 3 months later going, I got to find some more work.
Yeah. So I eventually landed a job that I applied for because I thought the listing for it was funny. And I didn't understand what the job was. And I had no idea what an association was. But I was like, well, if people are willing to write funny job ads, I bet you I'd like working there. Which panned out to be true. And I worked at that organization for over 6 years. And it was the Saskatchewan Trucking Association. And my start there was very interesting. I think at that point we had 2 staff members beyond the executive director. And my first week of working there, my coworker, um, his cancer came back. And it was very clear that it was going to be different this time. And he passed away. And it was, yeah, I think even for the first like month, people were like, what is this place? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what an association does. I don't really get what's going on here, but it is the trucking industry. And I'm doing some really cool stuff. Like I'm planning websites, developing databases, purging the office. And I was like, eventually I'm going to get to meet with government. So that's cool, which seems like such a novelty when you come from like a rural area. The idea that I could just go to the legislative building and like talk to people about regulation was really interesting to me. So once I started there, I kind of started doing more of the advocacy and lobbying side and really understanding the power that associations play in our country, in our province, in our, that community, even though everyone's from across the province, where I could get just this wild variety of work experience and get to do a bunch of cool stuff. But the Saskatchewan Trucking Association owned an insurance brokerage. So once I had worked for the Trucking Association, I was like, I kind of feel like I've done everything I set out to do here, but I'm not leaving because I really like it. So by then, the director of the insurance company was running all the business units, which was actually 4 different businesses. And I had kind of like kept like poking around in the insurance brokerage. Like we eventually shared a building. So I would wander over every once in a while and be like, what are you doing? And I saw a lot of opportunities for things where I was like, I can really help with that. Um, so I actually, the big shift, I went, I again, great female leadership. And she was like, why don't you go to this thing and see if you can make this apply to something? So I did, and it was an SGI Canada learning day. And I came back and I was like, I want to go work over there. So I did. And I worked in insurance brokerage for a few years. And then at the beginning of the pandemic, I kind of wanted to go back into nonprofit work. I really liked the insurance brokerage, but it was, again, I felt that like lacking. I was starting to get jealous of the things the people at the association were doing, even though I still worked with them. And I was kind of like, oh, I'm not sure about this, like as a forever job. Even though I think the insurance industry is fantastic, what I was missing was that like huge array of trying to do 1 million different things with a staff of 4. I was missing that. And so the brokerage needed to lay some people off. So I was like, can you lay me off? I'm going to go look at some other things. And they were like, yeah, sure, which was great. And then the layoff became permanent and they've never said it. But I think that my boss from that place saw that IBAS had a job listing. And I was like, hey, Derek, you should call Nicole. And then I ran into Derek at Canadian Tire. And he was like, hey, I've been meaning to talk to you because I had sat on some councils with IBAS. And I was like, is it about that job? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay. And then all of a sudden I was working at IBAS.
And so to the listeners, IBAS is
The Insurance Brokers Association of Saskatchewan.
there you go. And so and here you are today.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, as we were talking a little
path, but I'm very happy.
and so and interesting enough as we were talking earlier of, you know, here you are working at IBAS, you know, for how long now? You've been there for
Oh, it'll be a year in August. I'm still new.
yeah, and you still haven't met all the people in person.
I've met everyone in person at one time or another, but we have never
Been
all
together.
been in our office at the same time together. We were in a room together one time. But yeah.
Hey, so welcome to the pandemic and the new world order of
Mhm.
productivity.
Yes.
So and in your role presently, what do you have? What are you doing for the association? What are you doing for the members?
My role actually changed last week, my title. But I do many things. I mostly dabble in other people's business and then just latch on to whatever the executive director is doing. But I help run, IBAS is involved in so many different groups, and a lot of them are like we're IBAS's brainchild. So the Saskatchewan Business Council, which is this fantastic meeting of the minds. Um, and that is the leaders, like executive directors and CEOs of associations and chambers of commerce across the province. They come together, they share information, they brainstorm. So I am involved with that. We have something called the Emerging Brokers Council, which is up and coming, new to the industry, younger people weighing, like making sure that those voices are represented at IBAS in everything that we do. We run the Saskatchewan Insurance Workforce Development Coalition. So that one has become my baby. Recently, we've started up the Leaders Forum, which I'm very involved in. We're in contract negotiations for some motor license issuing stuff and those ongoing relationships with insurers, with our members, with government, those sorts of things. So I dabble in everything.
You have your fingers in a lot of pies.
I do, yeah.
And there's a reason for that, and that's good. That's going to come through yet. All right, being a good steward of time, I'm going to move on to our next question of the day. So, Nicole, I believe that we're all odd ducks. I believe that we're all misfits.
You're definitely a duck.
I believe we're all odd ducks. So tell me about a time where you didn't fit in, and that can be positive or negative. And what have you done differently your way to stand out? What makes you awesome? This isn't bragging. This isn't about ego. right? This is about what makes you you and what have you done differently and how are you the odd duck?
I think when I was working at the insurance brokerage, I was the odd duck because I didn't actually I worked at a brokerage in a management position, but I wasn't a broker and I wasn't support staff. So I didn't really fit in anywhere. And my job title was director of strategic something or other. So I really just took people's ideas and added my own ideas and then implemented things. And that was my job. Um, but it can be hard if you have a job and you have people, but they're not doing the same work that you're doing, right? So you're surrounded by people all day, but you're kind of a little bit isolated. And then not coming from that background of insurance, I felt like I was a bit of an odd duck there. But it was good because I think every organization needs an odd duck because if you're constantly yelling into this echo chamber, you're only going to hear your own thoughts back. And I think people, you like to call that disruptors or disruption. I don't love that word. I think it has can have a really negative connotation to it. But I think a lot of times people need an injection of outside thought. And I was that.
And so I'm going to tie this together because, when we met and as we through the leaders forum, right, for IBAS, and as I said that we were doing the work with Colby, right, and we discovered that your result was a mediator, right,
Mhm.
and a mediator facilitator is someone who sits right in the middle and basically it responds to everyone else. So,
Mhm.
and I think that when you were and just listening to you, going back to when you were a kid, right? The park. The park was my happy place. Why was the park the happy place? Because it was a place that I could bring it together. It was a place where I could be part of community. It was a
Mhm.
place where I could help others. You look in from the cold. It was a place that I could go and be a part of something so I could contribute to
Yeah.
other people's lives. And when you were in a role where you couldn't do that, and even your first job back in Regina, where it was cubicles here, but there was no bonding of bringing things together. It's like I don't fit. I'm
Yeah.
the odd duck, right?
Mhm.
So if I can just, I don't want to speak on your behalf, but it's just so interesting to listen to your story, right? Of how that natural mediator of who you are as a human, as a person, right? And how you're now putting that into your job is what makes you the odd duck, but that's what makes you awesome.
Yeah. And I think that it became not increasingly obvious, but we've talked before about, here's what you think you should be and here's what you actually are. And like anytime you go with who you think you should be and what you think you should be doing from these preconceived notions, you are going to be the odd duck because that's not true to who you are. And it's not in alignment with really what you should be doing. So I think even those times when you are the odd duck in a negative way, that's okay because it's gonna help you get yourself on a path of where you can go be an odd duck and really have an impact.
Hmm. Absolutely. And when you're in line with that and doing those things, right, that's what we talked about earlier. Like there's your authenticity, right? Here's who I am and this is what I'm doing and this is what I have to offer, right?
Mhm.
And instead of thinking, and we talked earlier about, having to, be a boss versus being a leader, or, am I going to climb over top of people to get up the ladder, right? Or am I going to hold the ladder for them? Right.
Yes.
And you're the person that holds the ladder. So, you're kind of like, if the world was a salad, you'd be the bowl.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Or those fun wood things that are a mix between a spoon and a fork, and they come and they just get that action going.
Part of, right?
Yes.
Well, I think you're awesome. So,
Thank you so much.
and anytime I come across a mediator facilitator, I always give them a big round of applause because they're so amazing. And you are such, there's, you and the other people that are like you, there's such a contributor to society to make the world a better place. So you better the pond.
Mhm. Hopefully that is yeah, and it's naturally what I'm drawn to in, I want to work at a place that sometimes it feels silly to be like provincial associations are changing the world, but I honestly feel that way. It is the most democratic thing. It is the power of a collective voice. It is, taking what one person or one business needs, bringing them together with other people with similar needs, wants, and like using that power of community or collective or of industry, as we could say, to really like move the needle on things and to be, go from being this one person that feels maybe powerless and isolated from one tiny corner of the world, and putting them together with all these other fantastic people who want similar things and just building that community.
Interesting. When we were talking earlier, one of the things that you actually said really struck me, right, is that, and you referred to yourself as connective tissue,
Mhm.
right? And I thought that was brilliant. I love it, right? Because it paints a wonderful picture, right? I'm connective tissue. I pull things together. I naturally connect, right? So that the whole is better than the sum of the parts.
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. So, can you tell me about a time when someone did something for you that left an impact on your life?
Hmm. So many times I can think of. I'm constantly surprised with the kindness and thoughtfulness of people in the world. I do think I have been fortunate enough, and I've said it a bunch of times now, to have really strong female leadership that has helped guide me and really held the ladder for me. And when I worked at In From the Cold, the executive director was a woman named Tara, and she was fantastic. And she taught me so much. Like, she was the one who was like, read this book. And that changed my mind about the whole wide world. And then when I worked at the Trucking Association, I eventually had a female executive director. She was the only female executive director in all of Canada. And I have an executive coach who's also a woman, who's held some very high up leadership positions in government. And I think that anytime that you're willing to hold the ladder for someone else so they can learn to hold the ladder for the next wave of people, that is an act of kindness, because they don't need to do that. None of those people needed to take the time out of their day to be like, hey, maybe you should change something about what you're doing, or here's an opportunity to. So let's say my executive director from the Trucking Association, when I felt like maybe I could dabble in insurance, was like, well, here, we'll pay for you to go to this course, check it out, see what you think. That is an act of kindness that changed the next, probably 10 years of my life. And you can call it good management or good leadership, but at the end of the day, someone did something for me that they didn't have to do, that made my life all that much better.
And through that, and those experiences, when we talked earlier, that's something you've done the same. It's the ripple effect, right? So they threw the pebble in, right, and the ripples went out, and because of you, you're throwing the next pebble in, and the ripples are going out.
Yeah. And I think it really helps, like, again, tear down that idea of we need to climb the ladder and be climbing over top of each other. Um, because those women that I really look up to, they don't do that. That is not how they operate, and they're very successful and they're great role models.
What a great picture, like that you painted, right? Of that whole thing, right? Of instead of, we're kind of being redundant here, but instead of trying to clamber over top of each other and stepping on heads and right and complaining that somebody's in your way, right? It's just be that person who holds the ladder,
Yes.
right? And then you assist along the way, and then now we all win.
Hmm. And I think, like, at the end of the day, isn't we can like there's always going to be competition, and I'm a very, very competitive person when it comes to certain things, like Monopoly, or you know things that in the grand scheme of things really don't matter. But I think this concept that in order to be great, that you need to be greater than everyone else, I don't anymore believe that to be the case. You can just be great. You're never going to be the greatest. There are so many incredible people in this world that if your goal is to be the greatest at any one single thing, good luck. I think you're setting yourself up for a lifetime of disappointment, which might sound really negative, but if you have that drive and you have that desire to be great in your world. I used to think that being great meant, when I realized that I wanted to do something that was really impactful, I tried to get a job with the branch of the federal government that went into war zones to like distribute rice. because in my mind, that like foot soldier of the cause was you have to be the greatest. You have to go all in. You have to do it on the largest scale possible. Um, and I'm glad that I did not qualify for those positions because I was like, I am gonna, go to places like the Congo and help take care of the pygmies because I feel like they're at a real disadvantage here, which people do that, and that's great. And I think they need to do that. But I think I operate better, cleaning up my own yard, so to speak.
I heard a great quote yesterday. I was listening to a podcast, and it was, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Right? Like one of those big bikes that if everyone pedals it, you can get places.
Right, exactly. So, what are you doing presently right now to better the pond? And the bigger question that I really like is, why are you doing it?
Well, I'm going to talk about IBAS. So I'm going to say we because I am not doing any of this in isolation. And because I'm the newest member of the group, I feel like I really just latched on to everything that was going on, but I'm very proud of it. So IBAS runs the Insurance Brokers Association of Saskatchewan, runs an annual charity campaign. So when I came on last year, they were kind of wrapping up their campaign for 2020, which the idea that a group of people early on in the year saw that we were in a pandemic and we're like, no, we can still do this. Incredible. I was so impressed. They raised over $50,000 for Stars Air Ambulance in Saskatchewan. It was so creative. Everyone just was really bought in, and not just staff. We're talking membership and other people involved in the industry. So our members would be insurance brokers, but the insurance companies and our sponsors and our partners and everyone was just so into getting this thing done. And that is my cup of tea. So at the end of 2020, it was pretty obvious that there was a need in Saskatchewan to not just support a single organization, to support as many organizations as we could, with the biggest issue of the day that we were facing, which was mental health. And in no political sense of the world, is just there was something going on and people in our province needed a little bit of assistance. And that became the Brokers Care campaign. And that is our annual charity campaign. It is ran by IBAS, but the heart of it is the IBAS membership and all of our wonderful industry partners and things going on throughout the entire year. So instead of, squirreling away all the money and giving like a big check, we decided it would be in the best interest of the province to fund small projects along the way. So with the idea being, if you're doing a project and you're trying to better the pond, help your community, we'll give you money to do it. That's it. It was so simple. And I thought it was just the most beautiful thing. So to date, with over $40,000, IBAS has funded 11 and counting grassroots mental health initiatives in Saskatchewan.
Wow,
Isn't that great?
that is fantastic. And again, I was listening to a podcast here. I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts,
Me too.
and I love Simon Sinek.
Mhm.
But he was talking to, and I can't remember who the person was, but he was a pilot, and in the army, in the military,
Oh,
and he said that when people go into combat, in the military, when they come back, it's not a matter of when they're going to have to deal with it. It's not a matter of if, sorry, it's not a matter of if they're going to have to deal with it. It's a matter of when,
yes.
right? And so he really put that towards what was happening in the pandemic as well. Said we're all going through this. We're all kind of, I don't like battle, but we are kind of going to war with this thing, right? And everybody is on the defensive, and everybody is trying to protect. And so as we all go through this, is that it's not a matter of if you're going to have to deal with it. It's a matter of when.
Yes.
And we're all going through this, and so some people could be at the front end, some in the middle, some of the back end, right? And it's wonderful to have those support systems, because mental health is a real issue. It is a real concern. And there's so many people, I mean, there's a lot of organizations that are trying to help get people, just sometimes it's just a conversation. Lend an ear. Do something, right? And so I really honor what you're doing, because there's 11 new initiatives to help other people.
And I think it's really mental health is one of the, I'm not a doctor, don't quote me on this, folks, but when it comes to healthcare, it's kind of one of the only places that we can help one another within our own communities. And that is rare and it's beautiful and it's something we should take advantage of. Obviously, we still need our healthcare system and doctors and all those wonderful people that can help people when they need it the most. But I think a lot of times what you need is that sense of community. Or, one of the projects that we gave funding to was all they needed funding for was to have the appropriate Zoom account so that they could offer counseling to people in a greater region while staying within the HIPAA regulations. And it seems like such a simple thing. But for an organization, like you're helping them move this mountain that's in their way, then really, like at the end of the day, it's a couple $1,000s. Think about what the impact these people are going to have on this huge geographic area now, just because someone came along and was like, hey, I can help with that. We can help, no problem. Yes, so we are doing fundraising throughout the year, and it started with, I don't know if you can see my t-shirt. It says Brokers Care. We are selling these t-shirts. So we partnered up with Saskatchewan company Prairie Proud, and we had these t-shirts made with the campaign partner Wawanisa Insurance. And the sale of these t-shirts really helped fund the campaign and is still. And they're fantastic. They're very comfortable. We have sold them to brokerages and industry partners across the province. And now people are starting to show up to things wearing them, which to me just feels like a hug. So one of the projects we funded was a group in Saskatoon who actually works on workforce development. So fantastic, a lot of connections to schools at all levels. They had a mental health initiative that I knew about, but I didn't understand the huge impact that they were having. And I was trying to get them these t-shirts. And they're like, hey, well, we need them by Wednesday. And it was Monday. And I was like, well, you're in Saskatoon. Like, I don't know what to do. Turns out Canada Post, I did not give them enough credit. We got the t-shirts there. And I was like, okay, if you can wear them in the video intro. And then when they started telling me about how they were doing this, and I thought they were doing a presentation to 200 children, but I think they were doing it to over 200 classrooms. So it ended up being like over 8,000 students. So when you think about the impact they made with we only chipped in a little bit of that. I think we gave them around $6,000 and some door prizes. But those just small acts from one organization to another, and you impacted 8,000 children. And I think that this is something the insurance industry has always done. And it's nice to be able to shine a light on it. So there are over 300 insurance brokerage branches in Saskatchewan in every corner. And in a lot of places, they're the lifeblood of their community. They provide an access to government services through the driver's licensing, and they provide an essential service with insurance sales. They also sponsor sports teams and parks, and they employ people, and they run chambers of commerce, and the towns are better off because they're there. And now all these organizations get to be better off because the insurance industry and all these people, thousands and thousands of people, are going to be better off because a group of businesses came together, built a community within the Insurance Brokers Association for specific purposes, but also saw a place that they could do even more. And it's wonderful.
Yeah, you sit and listening to you. I mean, it goes back to what I was saying with the ripple effect. I mean, isn't that incredible? Like just, one act of kindness from, let's say, an organization, and it goes to you, which goes back out to other organizations, which now affects 8,000 children.
Right.
I mean, it's just
because someone bought a t-shirt.
Because someone bought a t-shirt. Just stop and think about that for a second. Like, it's incredible.
The huge impact. And I think that's when I knew applications when they were coming in, I would message my coworkers because there's a pandemic. So we do a lot of chat botting. And I was like, did you cry? Like, what do you mean? I'm like, look at what these people are doing. Like, you didn't cry over this, which I get is not everyone's response, but the level of passion and compassion And some of these organizations is just, it's such an incredible thing to see. And I think, especially since I'm not from here, Saskatchewan is so painfully humble sometimes that I'm like, if you took what you were doing and you transplanted that into a more metropolitan area, you would be running like these huge marketing campaigns and you would be winning awards and getting pats on the back. And you would be seen as this like iconic individual or this iconic organization that everyone else should strive to be. And that is almost every business in small town Saskatchewan and in our urban centers. These really innovative groups of people that are doing boots on the ground work in their communities, and making a huge impact not only on commerce in Saskatchewan but on its population.
Hmm. Yeah, and they're just people,
Yeah,
right?
there's
They're just people.
nice people.
Just nice
Yeah.
people. Just, but what they're doing to better the pond, right, is having a huge impact, um, which is absolutely remarkable. So, thank you and thank IBAS, right, for, well, I mean, you're spearheading it, and you're throwing in the first pebble.
Well, I would say Wawanese insurance for the first couple. It's yeah, it's and we're not IBAS, right? Like I am staff. Everyone who works there is staff. IBAS is the brokerages across the province. That's who IBAS is. It's its membership. It's not, you know, 5 people that sit in an office in Regina. And we're there to help them and serve them and, execute their wishes. Like if we had an idea where we were going to say, let's start this huge annual campaign that's going to be a ton of work, it's going to take a lot of resources. If that wasn't what brokerages were already doing, if that they didn't have that service community mindset, we wouldn't be doing it. They make those calls. So it was really just taking what they were doing and amplifying it, right?
And on a different note as well, with what you're doing is, also with the Leaders Forum. IBAS now has created an educational platform, right, for their members, right, to grow and learn and develop, right, again, and that's where you guys are also bettering the pond that way. So give yourself a little bit of a pat in the back that way too.
IBAS is great at stuff like that, building that, from within the larger community, take a smaller community of people who want to lean on each other, learn from each other, and do better tomorrow.
Mhm.
And that's the Leaders Forum.
Mm-hmm. And again, there's another pebble that IBAS threw into the pond.
Yeah, we're hoping that one has a really, really big ripple.
I believe that it will, because it's got great leadership to drive it.
Thanks.
You're very welcome. So, looking back and looking forward, can you paint me a picture of your golden pond? What does the future look like, Nicole Sinclair, in your mind? Just paint me a quick picture.
I'm not a big future planner, which I know goes against like most of my other personality traits. I just value that sense of community. And if it's in a workplace or the community that I build in my personal life or the things that I volunteer in, that is just, I like to, even though I do need a lot of alone time, surround myself with people that are kind of all moving in the same direction. And just do whatever I can to help. We were at I don't know if you know this, we have a bunch of community fridges here in Regina now. And I was dropping off food at one of them, and something had gone wrong with like something that was supposed to keep stuff cold. This room was very hot, and there was a phone number, so I called it, and these people showed up, and I was like, "Oh, is this like you're in charge of the community fridge?" She was like, "The community owns the fridge," and I was like, "Wow," because here's someone who probably spearheaded hundreds and hundreds of hours of work, brought 10 or 15 local businesses together to build a structure on property that someone was like, yeah, you can use that. And manages it and shows up when the fridge isn't working anymore. And some random girl's like, hey, it's really hot in this room. And it sets up a cleaning schedule and is, they call it mutual aid, feeding the community by the community, no barrier, just people helping people. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. she could have gotten a lot of media attention. She could have had a spotlight shone on her, and anyone who's done these community fridges could. And I follow them on all social media. I've read so much about them. I drop food off at them all the time, and I have no idea who's behind them.
Hmm.
And I think that, to me, that goes back to like the don't tell me what your priorities are. Let me see your budget and I'll tell you what your priorities are. I think that speaks volumes to where that drive to make a difference is coming from. Um, Different ways in which it can operate. People deserve to be thanked for their work. If you have a great idea and you put in a lot of hours, I think you deserve to be recognized for it. But to know that there's people who are willing to do that and say like, hey, this was all of us, I think it's an incredible thing. And I think, with the leaders forum, the outcomes of that will be like, I can schedule all the meetings and prep speakers and send out documents all I want, but it's the people who are willing to show up, do that work, sometimes have these really difficult conversations with each other and themselves, and then go on and hold the ladder for other people. And like the leaders forum will be a successful thing, the same way that Brokers Care is a successful campaign. And the people that really, really put in the hard work and the dollars, the spotlight won't be as much on them. And that's really an interesting dynamic to me.
That is a picture of your park.
My park, yeah.
Your park. Yeah. So one last question for you, Nicole, is if you were standing on the top of a mountain and the whole world was intently listening to you, what would you say?
Be kind. Take care of each other. I think that is something that in a lot of places we have strayed from, that idea that is we are responsible to take care of one another. And the world is changing. People are more stacked on top of each other, but further apart than maybe we used to be, right? Mm-hmm. If I need milk, I'm going to go to the store and get it. I really like my neighbors. They're all very lovely. But I probably wouldn't go to their house and ask for it. And I think that is starting to go extend to everything. Like we have so much charitable nonprofit work and so much giving and stuff, but it is very easy, especially when things get scary, like during a pandemic, to remember that we are responsible to each other and for each other.
Absolutely. And one of the, going back to why I created this podcast to begin with, right, was to hear stories like yours, to listen to people like you, because it's people like you that do make the world a better place and that do make a difference and do make an impact, right? And you're taking your time and effort and energy, right, to throw that pebble in, and you're creating ripples.
I like to throw as many pebbles in as many places as possible.
And you are. So, Nicole Sinclair, I want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing your stories. And if anyone wants to find you, where can they find you?
I'm in a top secret location at the moment. Just kidding. I work for the Insurance Brokers Association of Saskatchewan. We are located in Regina. I am on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I should have memorized those, but I did not. You can find me online. I will be at all IBAS events moving forward until the end of time.
And if anybody wants to, with the Brokers Care, can people be involved with that, or how would they contact you? Or
we have a bunch of different ways that people can get involved. If you want to buy one of these wonderful Prairie Proud t-shirts, a large portion from every purchase goes directly to the campaign. Plus you get, these aren't like regular promo t-shirts. I should say that as well. Prairie Proud makes quality wares. So you get these great shirts. So you could do that. If people just wanted to donate to the campaign, they could do that. We're not a charity. We can't offer tax receipts. Or if you're an organization that thinks that Brokers Care could help you, we're going to do more. We will be doing more. So keep your eyes on our website. And I would encourage you to, be your own campaign as well. So you think about some of these organizations where a huge impact was made with $2,000. If you and your friends are looking for something great to do, bottle drive till you get to $2,000 and give it to an organization who's rippling.
Sage advice. So there you have it, folks. I had a great time here today with Nicole. And this is Warren Barry, and I'm flocking off to take you beyond the pond to better the pond, because we're better together. Thank you ever so much. And thank you for who you are. And thank you for everything that you do, Nicole. You're creating ripples, and you're making an impact.
Thank you so much, Warren. So are you. You have a lovely day.
You as well.